Can the human eye capture the last image it sees before death? Well, in the late 19th century, a lot of scientists believed that it could, and that gave rise to the idea of optograms. For years, researchers, detectives, and even murder investigators searched for evidence that the human eye could be the last telling witness of a crime. But how close did they get? In this video, we're going to be looking at optograms, these forbidden photos that it was for a long time believed that the human eye was capable of capturing and storing at the moment of death. It is October after all, so this seems like the season for it. This story begins in the late 1800s with a German physiologist called Franz Christian Boll. Boll was conducting some groundbreaking research into the human eye when he discovered something unseen before, a light-sensitive pigment in the retina that he named rhodopsin. This pigment, also known as visual purple, reacted to the light and darkened with exposure. But what made Boll's discovery so fascinating was the idea that this chemical, this photosensitive chemical, could somehow react with the light and capture and store an image, much like photographic plates in the early days of photography. In theory, scientists believe that the human eye, just like a camera can capture a moment of time, could retain an image of the last thing it saw in the moment of death. This was the foundation of what became known as optography. But what was it that made these scientists believe that the human eye could capture and store an image, much like a camera or a photograph? Optography rests on a simple scientific principle: that light enters the eye and reacts with the photosensitive chemicals on the retina, which trigger a series of chemical reactions. Rhodopsin in particular changes structure when exposed to light, which is integral to how we actually see. Some scientists speculated that in the last final moments of life, the human eye could capture and store and develop, much like a film photo, an image of the last thing it saw, especially if that death was particularly sudden or violent. Researchers conducted some pretty gruesome experiments, firstly on animals, and then later on actual human cadavers, all in an attempt to retrieve these final images from the retinas. A famous early experiment was conducted on a rabbit and involved the rabbit's eye being exposed to a bright image before death. In this particular example, that bright image was actually a window. This rabbit was kept in a small enclosed space indoors with a large window as its light source, and as you can see in this optogram, you can make out the general shape, the brightness of that window there. And this was pretty hopeful evidence for the scientists and the researchers. This was a big thing. This suggested that there was actually some substance to this theory. This image was the first supposed optogram, and although it was hopeful and suggested that they were on the right path, this was only one experiment and one result, so the science was far from conclusive at this point. The most infamous applications of optograms occurred in criminal investigations. Imagine this: a person is murdered and the investigators want to extract the killer's image from the victim's eye. Well, that is exactly what investigators aimed to do in the murder case of Lord Darnley in 1567. Though the concept as we understand it of optograms was far from existence in the 1500s, the idea of an image being extracted from a human eye was clearly a thing. I think this is obviously something that is inbuilt in human nature somehow, that the eyes see, so even in death could they be telling? I think it's something that must have plagued us for a very, very long time. But even though that this was well before optograms existed or before any of the science on them was conducted, they still tried to get an image out of the eye. Then in the 1800s, when optograms were actually being developed and the science was being realised, they revisited that case, hoping that optograms might be able to help them solve it. When Lord Darnley was found strangled in a garden near Kirk Field, Edinburgh, theories abounded. Could the killer's face be preserved in the nobleman's dying eyes? This question resurfaced in the Victorian era, when the optogram theory gained traction. However, no evidence was ever found. In a later case, police in Germany tried to extract an optogram from the eye of a murdered man in 1880. Once again, the results were inconclusive, and so skepticism began to grow amongst the scientific community. around Optogram? What were the limitations to this macabre science? As compelling as the idea of optograms are, clearly a concept that has interested humanity for hundreds of years at this point, modern science has pretty much all but debunked them. The problem lies in the nature of rhodopsin itself. While it does react to light, the reaction happens very quickly and fades very quickly, meaning that they're never really stored, and to be able to retrieve them is a bit of an impossibility. Additionally, the retina's structure doesn't really support the film-like development process that the early scientists understood and were attempting on the eyes. Essentially, even in death, the eye's chemical reactions are far too fleeting to ever be stopped, caught or captured. And although they do produce the images we see, cannot produce and store an image to be seen later on. At least not yet by any science we have currently. Attempts to develop these images over the years has been relatively inconclusive, although there has been some optograms created that looked almost convincing, that might have been suggestive to the fact that this could have worked. A lot of those could fall down to coincidences. It's not been a replicable thing, it's not been able to be recreated consistently, so even though there might be the odd time where it almost looks like it's worked, scientists have basically now proved that it doesn't. And the theory of optograms has been, scientifically at least, abandoned. And although scientists have abandoned the theory of optograms, people haven't. I think the idea of optograms plays into the human condition, into our innate obsession and fascination with death and the unknown. There has been a wide array of books and films and video games that have featured optograms as parts of mysteries and solutions and horror and fantasy, because it is something that holds a lot of allure to the human condition. Eyes are like the windows to the soul, something that many people believe. And if that's a common belief, or at least a metaphorical belief that many people do feel and relate to, then why couldn't they hold more? So although we're way past the 1800s and the Victorian times now, where macabre sciences were all the rage, it's still a concept that interests a lot of people, even if it isn't within the realm of reality. So, can the eye truly capture the last image it sees before death? Science says no. Some examples suggest maybe yes. And a lot of people still believe what scientists would call a myth. I personally really don't like the fact that science has debunked this. I would rather this still be a big myth and mystery with all the, macabre allure around it. I think that would be pretty cool, but I guess not. Well, that's all I've got to go through for optograms. I thought with it being October and Halloween coming up, it's the spooky season, that I'd do some photography related videos on some pretty eerie concepts, and I've got a few more on the way, so do stay tuned for them. If you like this kind of video and this kind of vibe, then please do hit the like button. It does let me know what kind of things people want to see, and if you want to see more about photography and documentaries and all that kind of stuff, then hit subscribe, because I've always got loads more on the way. Let me know in the comments what you think of optograms and this whole spooky, eerie science that once existed, and let me know if there's anything else like this, any other weird photographic theories. I'd love to look into some stuff like that and make some more videos of that in the future. Sound for watching. I'll see you in the next one.